Secretary Rubio wrapped up a much-anticipated speech at the Munich Security Conference, striking a less aggressive tone to European allies than they heard last year from Vice President J.D. Vance, also offering more reassurances than they heard from President Trump in Davos just weeks ago. Joining us right now is Democratic Congressman Adam Smith of Washington. He is the top Democrat on the House Armed Services Committee. It's good to see you, Congressman. There was a lot of anxiety over what the kind of official line would be and message would be from the Trump administration going into this much-watched security conference. After Rubio's speech, people are described as being in the room as offering an audible sigh of relief. From what you've heard from him, should they be relieved?
Well, it helped. I mean, he gave a speech that basically was far more conciliatory and unifying than what Vice President Vance did last year, where he basically attacked Europe. So I think it showed a tone that was different. And that's a positive because, look, I mean, most of us want to maintain a positive relationship with our European allies. And Secretary of State Rubio sort of gave a speech that implied that that was possible. The other part of it, look, the idea that Europe should do more to defend itself, I think we can all get behind. The question is the U.S. going to continue to participate in that alliance? So as good as the speech was, I think the concerns that linger from the people I've talked to is actions speak louder than words. You know, if the president is still out there threatening to make Canada the 51st state, threatening Denmark, putting more pressure on President Zelensky in Ukraine than he is on President Putin. That's what's a little troubling by Secretary Rubio's visit to Hungary. Hungary certainly reflects an approach to Ukraine that is less supportive. So the actions are going to matter. The speech calmed people down, but is there going to be a change in the specifics of what the Trump administration does towards Europe, towards Ukraine, and towards just our system of partners and alliances all across the country that he's done so much to undermine in the last year?
Very much related to exactly that, as we're just learning from the New York Times that Canada is planning to announce a new defense policy this week, and as part of it, planning to move to divert billions of dollars in military spending that it had long given to U.S. defense companies, instead directing it to domestic manufacturers. And the New York Times has a quote from the policy document that says this: long-held assumptions have been upended about the end of the imperial conquest, the durability of peace in Europe, and the resilience of old alliances. It is more important than ever that Canada possess the capacity to sustain its own defense and safeguard its own sovereignty. What does this mean for the United States?
Well, it means our system of partnerships and alliances is weakening and under threat, number one. I mean, that's always been the great strength that we've had since the end of World War II. We have more partners and allies than anybody in the world. And when you look at our competition with China, that's always been one of the biggest advantages that we have. China doesn't have that. The other thing that's really troubling about this is we have been working now probably for the last 6 or 7 years on a, quote, de-risking strategy from China. And other countries have felt that way as well, because China has used coercive power against countries like Australia and South Korea and others in the region to sort of bully them. So those countries have looked for other options. We have wanted to be that other option. Now you have a situation where our partners and allies are talking about de-risking from us because they don't think they can depend on us. Forget depend on us. They view us potentially as hostile, because we are threatening their territory, we're threatening sovereignty, we're threatening some values that Secretary Rubio didn't talk much about. He talked about the cultural connections between Europe and the U.S. and Christianity. He did not talk about the values of sovereignty, about a rules-based international system, about the right of everyone to have a say in how they are governed, and respect for borders. So those values have gone away. So now we've got our partners and allies de-risking against the U.S. Unquestionably, that weakens our country.
Yeah, I mean, if Canada's saying, hey, guys, we're going to take our billions and spend it elsewhere, that's not a message that you think should sit well with, well, any of those U.S. defense companies or the White House at this point. You are also, at the very same time, all of you, facing a funding fight continuing on Capitol Hill to end this government shutdown that went in place over the weekend. I want to play for you what Republican Senator Mark Wayne Mullen said on CNN just yesterday, blaming Democrats.
They're not stopping ICE from doing their job. They're not stopping the Border Patrol from doing their job. All this is a political theater because of the State of the Union that's coming up a week from Tuesday. Because if this was really a serious conversation, they wouldn't be holding the TSA workers or FEMA or the Coast Guard hostage over something that cannot be done by the ridiculous shutdown of DHS.
Congressman, what do you say to that?
Yeah, I've worked very closely with Mark Wayne, consider him a friend. I think that's willfully ignorant to say that. What we are after is blocking ICE from violating the rights of people all across this country. And I think from what we've seen in Minneapolis and elsewhere in the country, there is widespread support for the idea that ICE is violating the individual rights of people all across this country, certainly not just in Minneapolis. We've seen it in their violent confrontations. They are detaining people without probable cause or due process for weeks, detaining U.S. citizens. They are smashing in windows, dragging people out of cars, breaking into people's homes without warrants. We need protection against that. And to vote to fund the Department of Homeland Security without getting those protections would be incredibly irresponsible. And Senator Mullen can disagree with that. He can say, hey, I support what ICE is doing. I think it's just fine. But to say that it's political theater to try to protect the rights of the American people, I mean, 2 people were executed by the ICE forces in Minneapolis and lied about it. Okay, this is very serious. We are doing this because ICE needs to be reined in for the protection of the rights of people in this country. So let's have a debate about that. That's not political theater. I can't think of a more important substantive issue for us to be debating in this country right now.
Let's see where that debate goes from here. Congressman, thank you for coming on. John.
All right, happening now. Opening statements set to begin any minute now in the trial of a father facing criminal